Okay. Thanks to all of you for coming. Thanks to all of you for coming to all the events that have been going on earlier in April, and for hanging in there and coming to see us for the events that are coming up too. I'm Bill Lavender with the New Orleans Poetry Festival, and I'm here to just get things started. This is the POG reading series reading, and really happy to have representatives from the Tucson series with us tonight. And I'm going to turn it over, I believe, to Tenney Nathanson, who's going to introduce the group of readers.
Thanks so much, Bill, and thanks to Bill Lavender and Megan Burns, the directors of the wonderful New Orleans Poetry Festival, for making this thing happen from all over the world and to all over the world. We're sorry we couldn't be in New Orleans last year or this year, but this is a really good second best. And also to all the coordinators of New Orleans Poetry Festival, among them the POG recidivist alum reader, Rodrigo Toscano. So as Bill said, this is a POG and Friends reading. POG is the oldest established permanent floating avant-garde poetry series in Tucson, Arizona. Everybody who will read today has come to Tucson to read for POG, and Charles and I are among the founding directors of our group. And James Sherry, who's here today, will actually be reading at 6 o'clock tomorrow for POG. So 6 o'clock Arizona Pacific time, so that's 8 o'clock Central time. I'll do the first 3 really brief introductions, and Charles will do the last 2, and then we'll each just be off and reading without interruption. So thanks again. Norman Fischer is a poet, essayist, and Zen Buddhist priest. He's always writing and talking and being silent. He lives on the coast of Northern California. His latest poetry books are Nature, from Toowoomba Press, and the just out from Lavender Ink in New Orleans, There Was a Clattering As, a pandemic poem which he'll read from today. And Charles Alexander will read next, writes poems and other works, and has published several books. His next one, Pushing Water 3, Truro Shift, will be published by Cuneiform Press. In recent years, he's taught poetry and given readings and lectures from New York to Texas, to Boise, to Chongqing and Hangzhou. He loves to cook and eat all sorts of hot chili peppers. His wife is the painter Cynthia Miller, with whom he makes a variety of art and life projects happen, primarily in Tucson. Joseph Lease's critically acclaimed books of poetry include The Body Ghost, Coffee House Press 2018, Testify, Coffee House 2011, and Broken World, Coffee House 2007. Lease's poems, Broken World for James Sattler and Send My Roots Rain, were anthologized in Postmodern American Poetry and Norton Anthology. Lease's poem, Broken World for James Sattler, was anthologized also in the Best American Poetry with Robert Creeley as guest editor. Joseph's poem, Free Again, Why Don't People, was published in the New York Times.
And after Joseph, Saba Razvi, PhD, who is the author of the books In the Crocodile Gardens, nominated for the Elgin Award, and Heliophobia, contender on the Stoker Kahn Award preliminary ballot, and the chapbooks Limerence and Lux, Beside the Muezzin's Call, and Beyond the Harem's Veil, and Of the Divining and the Dead. She is currently Associate Professor of English and Creative Writing at the University of Houston, Victoria. And then we end with Tenney Nathanson, the author of Erased Art, Chacks, and the book-length poems Home on the Range, The Night Sky with Stars in My Mouth from O Books, and Ghost Snow Falls Through the Void, Globalization from Chacks, as well as the critical study, Whitman's Presence. A collection of Tenney's critical essays on American poetry is forthcoming from Chacks, and another book-length poem, Ghost Snow 2, Unwinding, is in the works. Tenney lives in Tucson, where he co-founded the POG Poetry Collective, serves as resident teacher for Desert Rain Zen, and teaches American poetry at the University of Arizona. So now you can take it over, Norman.
Thanks, Charles and Tenney, and thanks to Bill for not only the festival, but also a brand new book from Lavender Ink. I'm going to read from that. great to be here. Great to see everybody. Thanks for coming. Birds, birds, gather at feeder. Sparrows, juncos, pine, siskins crowding one another out, amiably flutter and dart off to myrtle or rose bush, wait and quick return. This writ by them in authorial confidence as pattern of their scripted moving in cloudy day. Any creature looks up at sky white, there are branches crisscrossed upon its blue. There are feet, 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 bird's feet, and fox paw at night never knew how to keep the trees that mingle in deliberate stillness. Oh, the birds! As in Canterbury's pilgrims or Orientals crossing the Red Sea toward Mecca, all sorts of humanity. Men of business, men of pleasure, parlor men, backwoodsmen, farm hunters, fame hunters, heiress hunters, gold hunters, buffalo hunters, bee hunters, happiness hunters, truth hunters, and hunters of hunters. Ladies in slippers and moccasin squaws, northern speculators and Eastern philosophers, Buddhist saints and Buddhist fakers, Buddhists and atheist Buddhists and scientific Buddhist Jewish Christians, English, Irish, German, Scots, Danes, Santa Fe traders in striped blankets, Broadway bucks in cravats of gold, Upper West Side Brooklyn Jews in sweats and payas, Kentucky boatmen, Japanese-looking Mississippi cotton planters, Quakers in full drab, African princes and queens in startling regalia, and dark fugitive slaves in shadows, hid fearful in their dignity and moral fervor to be free. U.S. soldiers in their regimentals, more slaves, black, mulatto, quadroon, Spanish Creoles, and Spanish Jews, and French Jews, Mormons, and Papists, gestures and mourners, teetotalers and convivialists, deacons, blacklegs and know-nothings, hard-shell Baptists, arrogant Negro freemen, Sioux chiefs solemn as high priests, a piebald parliament, Congress of all kinds, the pilgrim species, human, as pine, beech, birch, ash, hatchmatach, hemlock, spruce, basswood, maple interweave their foliage and roots in a natural wood. So these human, diverse in visage and garb, in pagan abandon, cultivating the decorative presence in all that flowed helter-skelter downstream in one cosmopolitan and confident tide, the barber set out his pole and posted his sign, no trust. Deeply harassed, ink, slow and soft and quiet, king thin, search for me and in, urge toward filching, take what isn't yours and make it yours, as if it were property. Locke thought it just, for improvement of the land, as an enclosed acre produces more than 10 left unimproved, a convenience for the good of the many. So take it, take what you find, make advantage in it, crunch numbers, capitalize the soul. Take any sense that truth is spoken here and package it, unfurls their banners, being alive's such a brief exaggeration, define it and it's gone. So accumulate wealth and power. Why not in fungible human experiment? But a stone's set in its ways. You can't draw blood from it. The moon, shocked by its own light, shining through a cloud. Skipping a bunch of pages. It's one continuous poem with lots of different material in it. I'm skipping about 40 or 50 pages. Epidemics become pandemics after having become endemic, lurking in the atmosphere, the soil, the soul, waiting to spring forth. Smallpox was endemic, epidemic, and pandemic for 3,000 years maybe, beginning when people first domesticated animals, coming from the animals, distempered by their natural resistance to domestication, i.e. having their genes messed with, but being unable to conceive of oppression or organized against it, produced this simple anomaly, shared between themselves and the upright species as a sort of unexpected offering or homage. Egypt had it, Ramses V died of it, the Romans had it, that is, the aggregation that spread economic opportunity, civilizing politeness, and class rule, so that by the 15th century all Europe had it, 30% fatality rate, but 90% of children. Having a child a year, losing a child every other year, the lot of exhausted, breeding women, the hard feelings persist. Parents would not name nor devote themselves completely to their children till after they'd survived the pox, not wanting to risk losing a designated and cherished loved one with a full identity, curtailment of identity being the chiefest form of the less they do eventually. The body politic adjusts temporarily, and enough people recovered with immunity, all others already dead, the disease disappears till in time it finds the opening to return in force, not out of any malice, but in the natural way of things that go always forward where they can to make more of themselves. When a virus finds virgin soil, a place inhabited by humans who have never experienced it, it has its way with them. So the peoples in the lands unknown to Europeans, tens of millions of whom succumb to smallpox and other innovated viruses in the so-called New World, clearing the land for occupation, destroying vast advanced empires, the Aztecs, Incas, etc., and creating the necessity for African slaves, since there were but few natives left or willing to be impressed as foreign labor always necessary to do the back-breaking work that requires lack of identity. Foreign here meaning lacking identity in our terms. In 541 in Pelusium, near Port Said, in Egypt, first cases of Black Plague, then spreading west toward Alexandria, east toward Palestine, and so on. First fever, maybe mild. Then the buboes, creepy black lumps in groin, underarms, all over body, and terrible suffering. The body capable, when fending off attack, of a range of terrible sensations that influence mind, language centers, causing delirium, lurid imaginings, sinking ravaged, and all but unbearable sensations, images, and ideations. Hell then exists as an actual place one inhabits for an eternal space of time, vomiting blood, racked by convulsions into the dimness and horror of a pestilential death. People tending the sick to witness what being human means under the worst possible conditions. The next year it struck Constantinople, capital of the Eastern Roman Empire under rule of Justinian, who paid for the burial of the dead, 10,000 a day, or so they say. People who ventured out of their homes wore name tags so that should they be struck dead in the street, their identities that connected them to social networks could be retained even in death, for otherwise a corpse is just a corpse. Think of it. Every corpse must be attended to in one fashion or another. Death for one is a cleanup project for another, and for still others, a source of wonderment, grief, and lasting diminishment. For others still, a source of income. After this, the empire struggled, difficult to find workers and soldiers. Wages and worker pride skyrocket among the few left able-bodied, so that the emperor was forced to pass decrees limiting the rise in wages and berating people for their shameful greed and selfishness and rejection of age-old traditions that define the relations between laborers and their employers. Revolts. Rome in 543, Britain 544, on it marched, each affected person a stone to tread on toward the next, a cobbled stairway to oblivion. Lasted till 750, a 300-year stroll. then back again 1347, killing every third European. After, in fall of that year, rat fleas carrying it entered Italy, always Italy, on a few ships from the Black Sea. When all the graves were full, trenches were excavated in the churchyards, bodies dumped by the hundreds. So when the Nazis, a human plague, did this 600 years later, it was a practice remembered, stacked tier upon tier for efficiency, like ship's cargo. All believed it to be the end of the world entirely as God had decreed and promised, and therefore the Jews were assumed to be involved. Never mind that they too died along with the rest, they must have poisoned the wells. Convert or die. It was 50-50, and the stiff-necked among them were taken to the Jewish cemetery and burned alive, Valentine's Day, 1349, dismaying even the Pope. Same thing in Frankfurt, Mainz, and Cologne. Those who could escaped to Poland and Russia, which is why your Yiddish-speaking grandparents came from there. Yet the plague ended and returned. Ended and returned for a century and a half, causing great alterations variously in societies where it thrived, giving common people the energy in their dismay and horror to overcome oppression until things quieted down, and the rational order of dominance over the rational order of dominance of concept over body, power over love, once again asserted itself, gradually, peacefully, or not. Cholera in the 19th and 20th centuries, SARS, MERS, AIDS, Ebola, COVID. Thanks, guys. Thank you very much. Wonderful to be here.
I have in front of me a miscellany of poems from different times, places, and generally very short. And I don't want to explain them. I'm just going to read through and see what I can do in 10 minutes and hoping that maybe they connect with each other or something connects with you. So this one, for now, for David. Property, 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 pivoted, 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 vaccine 8. The square root of 19 equals 0. Alternate answer, 3,009,788 and counting. Property, pivoted, canter, away, away. When did you make the connection between bloated bodies and bloated economies? Those last two lines from Roy Mickey. Patientia. Patience, a gossamer thread inside, a go somewhere head, perhaps the filaments of selves and senses displayed over time, then seen to fill years and spaces, no hurry needed, no needless seeking after logic and conclusion, nothing a spider could not find inside herself, inside her capably negative form of decision, form of instinctual pattern, stunning in its disinterest in anything but the arc of being, in silence and slow time turning as the dancer did, not race, but floated across the stage of memory, days, and years. From a book from Meow Press, 498-7. 4, 9, T, 8 toes, even valleys between whole numbers, commingling with leaves. Commingling with leaves. Prayer in the shape of Bread sticks in the mood. Seductive arms, leaning, bending. Seductive arms, leaning, bending. A lovely lingering lane, stretched to toe, to heel, to touch, a light, an eye, an ovule, a presence, not a symbol. A presence, not a symbol. Where an over from pair form, a deer throw toward never that tree again. Nonsense indeed, pageantry. Nonsense indeed, pageantry. New Year soft, turn around, and very pressed against a wall. Blue bricks interlaid in a wall. Color field. The red amulet provides a charm against impotence, providing there is no threat. A woman called herself a witch or everyone's grandmother. Red goes out from the eyes and comes back through clouds on the horizon in the peace of sunset. In a blue field, the words and lives, perhaps of water. What breaks the membrane of the surface? The rising and setting, the going forth and returning. An older teacher who often wore brown suits described life as a series of leave takings, and the earth is brown in places. Attitude also changes. There are black holes which bear weight, and it matters whether those places are absence or presence, and it's argued that black means no color. We are all colors and eventually go to black. She picked out a new green shirt for me at a thrift shop. Green emerges in spring in lush, wet climates and goes away again. Green liquid runs in mysterious dreams. Imagine a long run on a green field. Retrace your steps carefully. A lemon's whole strength. Peel it. Turn it in your hand. Egg yellow. Return every morning and watch the boat with yellow sail come to the dock. A yellow amulet signified safe return, providing that where you are going is in question. From Truro Shift. Somewhat dizzy from walking back and forth on the shore, in the sand, out on the rocks in the bay, unable to see the land side of the bay, west and north through the curl of the cape spreads north and west to land's end. Dizzy and watching the young piping plovers who keep pace, or I keep pace with them just ahead of me. When I stop, they skitter farther ahead. The only photograph allowed will be lodged in a memory. Memories of sea life, lodges in sand on shore. Shell after shell and crab shells, all kinds of shells have landed here, where I have landed now midday, and the sun shows itself first time today now in and out of clouds. Only 20 yards from the water, yet hear the music played, not a roar, through still, a constant curtain just away, just there. On a bench placed as memorial to one who believed nothing matters but love. Here, Dana Alba's footprints, either far below in older sand or forever scattered near and elsewhere. Dana the dawn, dawn of the dawn. Five short poems while walking with Jenny. 1. Azumba nagrovo malupukinkashu, malupinkashu ni, malupinkashu dai Zapinsk. 2. Ali chape, lin no tse dan, tse dan, tse dan, picky, 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 hi. 3. So, lo, so, lo, so, vagre zabant nigai, dumbra den, dambra den, shagan, shagan, oliva, solo, solo, oh. 4. Wet, graf, umba, shaktun, taklun, afaromba, magar, ligspa, rabuf, nofra, agalili, agalia. 5. Eoag, bafar, zim, aru, tenanifra, ash, ekana, liftaza, zo, jurian, jurian day, frobana, bafar, zim. This is owl, howl, and all call. Owl, howl, and all call. 2 blocks over, the hawk cries our world in small sounds. Wise or not, we see what the world has now become. Owl flies far away. Summer has no sky except blue, and blue alone open up for miles. Summer sky, sky, sometimes open summer, or sky, summertime. Dandelion time. While away the time, fritter it away. Time has no time for us anyway. Unless perhaps the children and the dandelions gather around the table and we sip the wine with friends and taste the meaty dandelions, and time simply ceases to be while we dance in time, in tune to the untuning of the afternoon. From Bookmark, or was between. Between brushwork and drip, a mural filled with orange gashes and brown slashes. Do you see the curve of a horn's bell there? Maybe hear a circular breath around a note that Dolphy might have played. Or is that a gray hand? Is this a body curving around and between one of the continuous or contiguous gray moments? Why paint anyway? Or is painting pouring? Is painting not painting at all, but a way of seeing? But now my partner says, oh, blah, don't even think of it that way. That is the body, the horn, just see it. What's there? Don't jump to what's in my mind. Don't make a metaphor of everything. Or as Charles says, a tree is like a tree, and out the window is the tree I like to sit under which additions may we remember. May I sit under the tree and look up to see 3 hawks again in their nest, mother, father, and babe just hatched and waiting for the daily deliveries of food from the large birds. Or was under which, yes, prepositions, positioning words are among my favorites. That is at the edge, more particular than near the edge, but either a locator in the way a graphing instrument might lead one to a particular point, or perhaps to a point of dispersal, because all points contain millions of points, an infinity of points. Isn't that what we learned when young? So why not act on that? I.e. that nothing is quite stable and nothing is alone. Are you alone? Why do you think so? Oh, not the hawk, but the light-winged dryad of the trees, or the inexplicable fact that a thing either is or isn't alive to us, the non-hierarchy, the non-being, or the all-being. Lovely you are, even amid the dispersal. And the hawk now only visits periodically, waiting for one of the smaller birds to offer her an opportunity. We are points of opportunity, and go that, or this way, or wave. Thank you.
Thank you, Charles. That was amazing. Thank you, Norman. That was amazing. Thanks to Bill and Megan. It's a joy to be part of the New Orleans Festival again. Thanks to Charles and Tenney. It's a joy to be part of this POG event. And thanks to Saba and everyone reading today. Norman, I have to hear from you about how you made that. Maybe we could do that after the Q&A rather than during it. I'm going to read a few poems from a new manuscript. The manuscript doesn't have a title yet. The poems have titles. I am very, 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 very grateful to announce that this book is forthcoming from Chax Press. And I couldn't be happier. I'm so grateful to Charles for his poetry and for all that he does. So these poems kind of go together. I'll just start in with a super spanking new sequence that I finished yesterday, if it's finished. It's called, can everyone hear me okay? Is my volume okay, Charles? It's okay. All right. Hi, Cynthia. Okay. This is called, We Had 50 Years to Understand This Crisis and We Still Are Doing Nothing. We had 50 years to understand this crisis and we still are doing nothing. Fire, tsunami, walls of flame. We have to cut emissions by 75% now. Drunk like gold coins, we raised the little psyches in the trash and water was my dirty name. We had 50 years to understand this crisis and we still are doing nothing. The earth will kill us. We killed the animals. Everybody knows. We are in a state of complete denial. Everybody knows. Laughed myself to death in a book of donuts. Laughed myself to death in a glass of spells. Just say missiles. Just say war. Just say money. Lock your door. We had 50 years to understand this crisis and we still are doing nothing. We are in a state of complete denial. Everybody knows. Over the river and through the skull, we wait for the days to burn. And you are you and you are someone else. Thunderstorm opens, rain in the streets, everywhere, rain in the trees. We brought our drinks, we listened. We had 50 years to understand this crisis and we still are doing nothing. Growth, the frenzied ruination of nearly every ecosystem on the planet. Wet light and wind. The sky is fire, shed your skin. You had 50 years to understand this crisis and you still are doing nothing. I should die. At that level, anyone still in the tropics would not be able to move around outside without dying. You're almost out of teal ink. Is revolution real? Over the river and through the skull, we wait for the days to burn. Democracy is resource wars. Democracy is buying. We killed the animals. Everybody knows. The next poem comes from the last few weeks of my father's life. Riding death. Lost highway, when he was in his prime, break summer, paint fear. He was wild, a little wild, he's dying, you can't exhale, he's dying. He's asking why you love him. Lost highway, kisses that we share across the sky. He is the drunk lane, the mayor, drunk lake, drunk in the lake. He's so tired and he can't what? My father just feels Sidney Bechet, Hart Crane, crazy cat. Now he doesn't have any. He gives life, kisses that we share across the sky. Lost highway, the book will save the book. Oil will kill the world. He's just trying to see, pay attention. He said joy. He said, feel this blue-green voice. He said, violet blue wind pushes river light, birches. Lost highway. He's dying in a town full of rabbits. He's dying lying on the couch. Lost highway. He hates sentimental slop. Hold his hand. He's from Coney Island. He's tougher than you. He says, when I squeeze your hand, I'm squeezing her hand. His mother in the room. His mother's me. Tell him, your mother loves you. Lost highway, branches, paradise. Are you blue? Are you green? Are you fire? Are you gold? Have you come to sing to me, to sing to me? lost highway, drunk like coins, Our lifestyle is wrecking the planet, for Christ's sake. She's drunk like a gold coin. He's drunk like a gold coin. The TV says the TV. Farmers are farmers. Corporations eat them. Rabbits are perfect. There was always all this death. There was always a photo and money, rain in the street, a bus and a photo of money. Ice in the river, lost highway, blue night comes, no one, nobody dies, nobody loses, lost highway. Where is the distance? Where are the gym shoes? Where are the toenails? Where is the pain? Where are the toenails? Please stop this screaming. Please breathe my newsprint. My eyes don't fit. Lost highway, joy could, blue fire, torn blue, you, dear one, dear smart shining you, dear you. My father's what? My father's rain becoming rain. Lost highway. Soft wind like a road, done. I wrote done. I tried to write don't. Toys. We burn our eyes. She was dying. We flew. She was dying. I'm writing inside death. I'm in the room. Trumpet flower, wet gray wind, wet red leaves, smell the rain, doors wide open. We burn our eyes. Round sweet arc of moon in the branches, lacy, she can't reach me. Mom, I can't dream. Fire floods the cities. We burn our eyes. Now what? I killed the animals. I am the lie in the throat of the eye, and I am the fire. You're in some town, you're in some leaves, panic farm, sizzling burger sky, birds on fire. We touch the gone voice bent in half, and mom is green, and she is dead, and she is aware. And walls of flame, you spin the spin, you go insane. You eat the beat, you drop the pain, fire tsunami, birds on fire. I am the lie in the throat of the eye, and I am the fire. And the last poem I'll read this evening is Shame. Biosphere collapse, too hard to say. And don't say spirals, don't say feedback loops. Money eats my face, releasing all the methane. What was there to do? The animals are gone, are going. We kill them. I gave away my right to think. I gave away my only mouth. Light on the ground, light on the water. Mom, I can't dream. The world's vertebrates died. Sorry, Mom, I can't dream. Half the world's vertebrates died. Talked to me in my stroller, told me that. My eyes were bright. You told me that. The sky is fire, corpse light. I wanted everything. Panic farm, we burn the air. Flames so high. Heat death, whole regions. The earth killed me, the earth killed us. I was a child, I was writhing. My eyes are in my dreams. I'll drown in there. Thanks. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Bill and Megan. Thanks, Tenney and Charles. Thanks, Joseph and Norman. And all of you guys for being here. I'm going to read 5 poems. The first one is called Chrysopoeia, and it's from a larger poem called Chrysopoeia in Isagogy. It has to do with alchemy. The transmutation of any element into gold is the gilding on the screen. Rumpelstiltskin taught the maiden to spin the straw into gold. She sat in a tower made of ivory. The transmutation of a thing into another thing, wherein the thing is substrate and another thing is the precipitate of a philosophy made of life, clay, and breath, is something of a work of greatness, greatening the grating hours of harsh days as its sun slips into illumination and silvery sheen. Every night is a howl of wolves, wares wearing a sound that stops the unturning humor's cold. She spun the straw, but she did not spin the straw. Her shadow spun the straw, and so she spun the straw. It is the leaden that is led by an anger, reactive and reactionary, and alembic among the people, led into a leading energy in service of a wizening. The crude cut of the desire is the clarity, the clear-eyed cleaving of a world that means another word for something of a complication beyond complicity. Hurt hands and hearts are unclear about clarity beyond a grievance of blood and bone and blight. Man saw a shadow where she was spinning, and in the dawn the straw had been replaced by gold. But seeing what is sought is just a seeing in the darkening light, a seeing that says, all lamps are lit, and the light on the other shadow is a perpetual blaze, a burning beyond the properties of element. Fire demands fire, demands fire, demands something to turn into the certainty of ash or glimmer. And so she spun straw into gold. This one has one reference to a book by Fariduddin Attar called The Conference of the Birds. And the word is Simorg, which means both phoenix and 30 birds. In what the shadow said before the Simorg. Circle of air, circle of salt. You do not know my name. Circle of sand, filling with the darkness and the wet strings of rot. You bind me, you contain me, you remind me that this song is my wood and my grove, my compass, my snow. Split with the maw of your tongue's lust, red, like this is a whisper in the darkness you hold fevered at bay. That these, the bonds we make in shadow and blood, bring power and the song of searing, so surrendering apart because every man would bow his head before the kiss of Sekhmet. Its toothy sound and openness, a gristle like the mud-filled milky vessel of man in pain, kneeling. Circle of clay, it calls you just there beyond. It opens a door, moon white and angry, moon spilt and seeking for glassy eyes, fish wide, feathers and lenses, lore for the market, lyre for the magician, long forgotten in your shadow, in the blood clotting in your bones, for the one you woke with your pen. I am unwritten in the breeze. Do not call me forth. Write your love in saffron and oil and the hues of sacrifice and grief. Circle your sounds in the glyph of shadow and blazing light. Hear me and do not answer my call. This is from a longer section. In my book, In the Crocodile Gardens, there's a sort of character that repeats and he's a dervish, but in this one, he's a soldier who's sort of connected with the dervish. This is Dervish of the Restless Heart, Anthem for Those Ancestors, and it was written at the Kundiman and Kaya Press AWP Seattle party, which had a Bruce Lee theme. So everybody read a Bruce Lee poem in one of their own poems. I don't have for you a Bruce Lee poem. I don't have a poem about an elephant speaking in the voice of Ganesh. I don't have the verse that verses the fundamentalist impulse to blow shit up that you don't like. I don't have one foot in one land or one in another. I don't know the name for myself that isn't diaspora. I don't fit into one tongue or another, but I miss the tongue of that cowboy coming back home in a big truck still smelling of fracking in the fuel fields. I don't have for you a poem on the occasion of the owning of the race of the racists. I don't have a voice stifled for you beneath some unchosen veil. I don't have for you words that speak your language. I don't have for you words that say approval, not from home away from home either. I don't have for you a poem about the nation of my name, just the sinewy sibilance of my fingers scratching out sighs on a page while I think of that good old Once Upon a Cowboy saying, I don't really read such books that often, all the while reading stories on my skin, his fingers writing silence on my sun-browned sin, and my thoughts reaching out to hold his bearded face, pull his hips close to mine so that I am filled with a forgetfulness of words that I cannot name or unlearn how to say. Those places he has been, I have not. He has seen the sands that gave me my name, Khan, Yamakan, Kaf, and beyond. I do not have for you a poem about the nomad in my blood that knows these sand songs that I do not know how to say. Oh, tires of knots, untie my tongue, unknot what I do not have for you a poem about. I'll read two more. And these are prose poems, so they're long, big, chunky poems like this. But for the garden is the guardian ravenous. Some hours till dawn by the side of a road with spent heart. What the want doesn't is a light on a highway, lined by night, by bright needled cacti, by a moon blood lingering on the glowing gravel of an unromantic interlude past abandoned by the long set sun. A space like a breath held in. What hole there cowers filled with toe-thick ants, and a scorpion's black tongue isn't a scarab-scented vista, but a horizon for a star field fading through my earthen skin. Stone standing under the breath of darkness. What field goes undone is as open as the sun's distant perihelion, mapped, unmapped, unwandered like a nomad caught in the buried, hollow sounds of the unsung sands beyond his sight. Do his dunes sing louder as the longing lingers, inching into lucid bright the Bedouin's waking dream? Do the ocotillo bloom before his sight? Like her, blossoming grass, like her wailing, a keening, a creeping, a crocodile's low and languid crawl? Starstone, seed against darkness, a pepper jasmine's breeze. Does the body give its breath at last, to hours spilling open and unstoppered? Shadow-born agarwood, oud, and vetiver, scar-won myrrh, the lingering attar of oasis rose. What lines the unmapped is the ink-thick carapace of the cartographer's lust, clotting in the moonlit brush, the desert rising to night song. What the want doesn't is a beam rising like a river water over a flat plain, over a tangle, a breath in the cold, over grain like the bleached bones of orbit, unrelenting, duneless, dry with howling. What is longing but a blooming in the blood, like this? A distillate wish of a rhizome's rooting in wet clay, a remembrance of water flowing from pools, from the cavern of the court of vines, heady with the beckoning susurrus of petals underfoot. And if I have just enough time, I'll read one last poem for you. It's called Nor Equinox Nor Promise. It's got long lines, but it's not a prose poem. If the tide is right and the moon is high enough to carry these waves to shore, if the boat's tether is knotted loose and its anchor is gone and its oars are wide enough to part the crests of these waves as they reach the shore, if Kilburney Kirk there is full of light by stars and by candles and by lanterns that skim off of these wet peaks and part the dark enough to carry this boat along to shore, if the green of the hills falls through the moon's reflection in the loch and opens a passage on the boat for those who might travel these waves to shore, if the high ways are clear of men and the hills shades and the boat seats too in secrecy, their shadows discreetly long along the moon's light as it moves along these crests that reach the shores of the other side, if the rope is untied, if the boat is still without broken boards, if the boat's wood is dark as the loch, if the oars fit rough hands, if you come to this green place sung by the gone, by the there where the wild roses grow and the moss blankets the stones beside the sound of the waves and the waves on the waves on the way high along the way to the shore. If you wear your mourning black and your beads of jet round your darkening throat and your darkling hair, shining darkly the moon and the mossy and the roses back into the night, if you shimmer in your rosy skin and the thistle bright sheen of the moon's milk face on your moss-given stride, if you cast your glance aside behind the fey hum of the night's dark shade, if you row stone as cold by the fair bell of the moon's light across the way, if on the other side of that shore is a new tether, a new anchor, a new rope, nay, a footpath made of old stone and ruined stone, and an archway not to a land of bones, if, thank you.
So this has been really wonderful. Thank you, Saba, Joseph, Charles, and Norman, working my way back up the stream for 4 fantastic readings. And thanks again to Bill and Megan and New Orleans Poetry Festival for hosting us. So I'm going to read a few sections kind of jumping around in the almost finished book manuscript Ghost Note 2 unwinding. I'll say just a tiny bit about each section, I guess, kind of before I read. So just in the first one, tacita appears, which is a little cup, but apparently in idiomatic Southwest Spanish, it means the toilet bowl. So I think it's important to know that. And then less important maybe, but Ivor is Ivor Winters, who turns up in the manuscript a lot. He's a conservative, crotchety 20th century literary critic who's kind of a villain and a bad guy in the manuscript. And then the second section that I'll read is one of a bunch of things where I'm doing a kind of riffing off of something that's read a lot in Zen centers, the Sandokai, or taking part in the gathering by Shutoshi Chen. And what else? The third section is just lifted verbatim from Joan Lindsay's book, Picnic at Hanging Rock, which was the basis for a Peter Weir movie. And a lot of sections of that are there in the manuscript. And then the final two sections are really short. All right. Straggled creosote, drowsing a little awake, hopped in a little wind and twinkling yellow burbuds, cloudless sky, intenser blue. What? It's a jackrabbit. Springs into the bush, careens sharp right, going under the dragging mesquite cover, kicking up gravel. Oh, spell checker, fuck off. Jump cut. Hunkered white cottontail, fuchsia first buds on a couple small prickly pears up on Hohokam, corner of Montezuma, where the gringos planted their flags. Tacita place. Better put soap in your mouth, toilet breath. Meanwhile, the Palo Verdes thrash and wind and some rocks. The smallest sprout shows there is really no death. Your description here. Earwax samadhi. Lulled into the buzz on faint Dot's porch, afternoon buzzing heat, and for several days thereafter, faintly buzzing ears, faint faraway caw of a crow or a couple crows or ears, leading you down or out or in to where there's almost nothing. Bzzz, an ice cave a million miles thick or the summer rerun. Bzzz, I cannot see what flowers are at my feet. Something, something, the pastoral eglantine, then the murmurous haunt of flies on summer eves. Please tell my mother and father not to worry. Why don't you tell them yourself? Okay. After great pain, a formal feeling comes, and bzzz, and the heart opens. Don't worry, mom and dad. Case 341 or 778. What deed is theirs unto the general nature? What plan they severally retard or further unknown? Then a couple other things. 1, 2, the night was blowing the stars around the sleeping bag. This is the story. I'd stepped out to pee under the night's fierce sky like a giant invisible flapping tarp. The wind was thrashing the stars around the sky. We're not fucking around here, Tenney. I rushed back inside, slid back in the bag to hide, but the wind and the scattered stars sneaked in there too. So I lay there inside along with the violent night, lie quiet, Ivor, not feeling entirely exempt and protected. Isn't that how it is, you used to say, and it augurs transformation. When Dongshan was leaving, Yunyan said, if you leave, it will be difficult for us to see each other again. Dongshan replied, it will be difficult for us not to see each other. And another time, I don't want to lose my dead mother, I said. You said, there's no place for her to go. Can you feel that? And then this is section 8 of the Shito rewritings, the final section from that. Don't limit yourself to your own small brittle bush. Chilean mesquite, big green stick tree, desert willow, down in the wash, look at the cottonwoods dozing and dragging a little in winter light. The typical story, if you don't see the way the crenellated dreamtime shimmers sinusoidal pulses with your own eyes, it's not there. Yes, it is, he said, motes coming toward you like snow pulled forward out of the deep blue light magnetic, out of the deep blue night magnetic into the mind's flux field, and you won't know the road. What road? There isn't one. Even as you're walking on it, it falls away beneath your feet into the untold air, drifting clouds, and walking the way the trees walk, the light ripples in water below the railway trestle bridge, dark green trunks and branches on either side where the bridge is flowing. The water is still, they say, and say, we're never near or far from it. They say it's the mind that moves, though the mind doesn't move, they say, like the body reliving a memory of relative motion. Diluted? Phew. Hence, we are smack dab in the middle. We're not cut off from it. By the railway trestle bridge, a log draped over the water. You could cross the river right there downstream from the bridge a little, walk into the brush, and brushing the mesquite trees, there's a place where the eye slides off to the not too distant vanishing point and loses itself back there in what is the sound of one hand. Mountains and rivers rest in it. Time shimmers, stops moving, and moves. The invisible light hums softly. Somewhere, nowhere, elsewhere, buzzing here, oh, you who seek the mystery in daylight or in the shadows of night, like quiet, don't fret. Rest easy in the dark, the something something, the pastoral eglantine. No matter what they say, you can't throw away your time. All the same, said the doctor, whose temper was fraying in proportion to the rapid swelling of his feet, I have a feeling we're on a wild goose chase. Some of the English are all right in the bush when they've been out here for some time, Dr. Cooling conceded. This one has more bloody brains and guts than any of us three put together, Albert said. But the doctor, unimpressed, had already selected a smooth rock for a seat and was unlacing his boots. Just blow your whistle, Jim. Be softer in summer. Get ready to be dead a long, long time. I think that's Faulkner, no matter. Be softer. Are you ready yet? Go home with love and in peace. Remember this day forever. Okay, thank you.
Hey.
The whole thing.
Thanks to everybody. Yeah.
Yes, thank you, everyone.
Is that everybody?
Yeah, this was really fantastic. It makes me want to get out to Tucson and see the series. You don't have any more readers, do you? Am I interrupting?
No, we're all done. We did it.
Okay, all right. Can we open it up for like questions and discussion? Anybody want to ask anything or just say anything?
I just wanted to make a comment.
Okay.
Maybe part of it, but you know, I love that last. You know, I like all the work Saba. Last poem, which had this long line rhythm, which felt like the lift of slow waves, and I know it had that Scottish kind of locks and that too.
Yeah.
And then Tenney came on, which his poems don't move that way, but Tenney, you were going back and forth. I kind of felt like there was a performance element that was a rhythm in that I absolutely loved. So
That's sweet.
I wanted to ask Norman Joseph's question. I don't know if you just want to re-ask it, but whatever Joseph asked is what I want to ask.
How did you put that together, Norman? How did you do it? What was it like to do it?
You mean the second section, all about the history of pandemics, that part?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I wish that I could say that I, exhaustively researched it, but I didn't. Elizabeth Colbert exhaustively researched it, and she wrote an article in the New Yorker about the history of pandemics, and I was riffing off of that. So a lot of that's all factual information, but it's all produced by her. That's really how I did it. It was actually not a very hard thing to do.
Well, I think what I'm asking about is the riffing, is the nature of the riffing. I got that you had sources, but something about the way it was put together was just so.
Well, it was just improvised off of. I mean, I read the article and then I just sat down and wrote it. Just pretty much. Just improvised it. Yeah. It's a little bit like I do a lot of this, right? Writing commentaries to text, right? It's a little bit like that. I was sort of like writing a commentary to Elizabeth Colbert's article, and where her article gave me something that I was happy to say or thought to say, I just went off wherever I went off, and then I let her bring me back, and then I went off again, and I let her bring me back, and like that. But the whole book, There Was a Clattering As, was something been wanting to do for a long time, to do a work which is almost entirely quotations. So I had been collecting a bunch of works that I wanted to quote from. And I'd been about a year since I was thinking about doing this. And so I had various texts I was saving up and sections that I wanted to quote. And then the pandemic came, and all of a sudden I had the time to do this that I ordinarily wouldn't have. And so I just did it in a kind of heat of the moment, just putting things together intuitively and improvisationally. And I mean, of course, a lot of it is not quotation, but a great deal of it is. And there's several pages at the end with, source notes where everything comes from. But that part about, I don't know if you recognize that part about the various kinds of human beings of all these different people. They're assembled on the steamboat in The Confidence Man. The Confidence Man by Melville is a big source, maybe the key source for the whole work. And that's me riffing on the description of the passengers toward the beginning of The Confidence Man.
Are you hungry?
Nice.
Somebody asked us if we were hungry.
Oh,
Yes, we're hungry. We can't go on too long because we're all hungry.
It's cat food. Yeah.
Anyway, thanks for asking. Thank you.
I wanted to ask you a question, Saba, because I know you're from Houston area, pretty much your life, and I know what a strange place Texas can be, politically and otherwise, and what is believed and not believed, and what religion that role plays, and yet you come out with this deep connection to myth, to mysticism, to sometimes witchcraft and magic, and yet to me it's always grounded, very connected to the earth, moving out of that, and it's beautiful. But is that something you've had like all your life, that kind of interest and belief, or is that something that came to you through your work, maybe?
It's an interesting question. I mean, I grew up in Houston, I was born in Chicago, but I'm always going to get the question, where are you really from? So, I always tell people India, Persia, Arabia, and it's a kind of an interesting heritage and history. So I think I'm connected to stories of my ancestors and the things of my ancestors, and then the various kinds of earth that we're around. I think I don't feel like I've been to a place unless I put my bare feet on its earth. So for me, I'm very connected to just the earth in general. My mother is very interested in gardening. So, as a child, my favorite myth was probably Persephone and Demeter. And I always associated with Persephone. Imagine my mom is Demeter. And, plants and trees and earth and mysticism, I think it's always just kind of been in the world around me. And so I try to take a different approach to it depending on what project I'm working on. So for Beside the Muezzin's Call and Beyond the Harem's Veil, I was looking a lot at Sufism and alchemy, but also the Book of Ingenious Devices, where the alchemy stuff comes from. And so drawing upon old notions of science and the connection of science and nature. With the poems from In the Crocodile Gardens, I was mostly looking at how occult ideas and mysticism connect to notions of love and desire. And so, and often battle and warfare with us and the planet, or us and other humans on the planet. And so I guess I've always just been me, and I've always been kind of an oddball, but I dig nature. So
Keep it up. Keep being out. Keep being out. It sounds wonderful. Yeah.
thanks.
Did I drown out Norman? I love your "This is not my."
Thank you.
Oops, sorry. I muted her while she was talking.
Good idea.
She said she loved your Bruce Lee poem.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
It was such a great party at AWP. Everyone read a poem by Bruce Lee and a poem by themselves. And I didn't have one. So I said, I'm going to write one right here while listening to everyone. And I thought these would be appropriate to read given the nature of racist violence that we keep encountering right now in the news. So that's why I chose that
I
one.
see that Loss has his hand up.
Yeah, my little yellow icon. And yeah, I had a question because obviously I'm aware of the environmental issues raised in several of the readers, if not all. But and I love the fact that there are specific references to specific creatures, which large parts of humanity do not distinguish between different creatures. I mean, you know, each bird has its own intelligence system and its own personality. And amid each type of bird, there's different characters among them. But also the way it sort of like came out in sort of rolling waves through the language itself, I just thought made a extraordinarily moving sort of touch with nature. And so I wondered, like, you know, what some of this presenters might feel. I don't know whether the pandemic or just in general, but that if it's environmental issues of the day or the pandemic, whether if this time that we've had sort of disconnected in a certain way, although we were connected, but has made those kind of issues and observations clearer or come more to the surface, and if in any way that specifically reflects the Tucson area.
Wow. I mean, I do think the pandemic has made some things more clearer. I think going back to something Norman said about having more time, I have more time than or at least I think I do, than I used to go sit under the trees and watch the hawks fly in and watch, you know, them build a nest. These are Harris hawks here. And yet I also think in terms of the Tucson area, you can't live here for 6 or 8 months and not understand the fragility of the desert, and you know, whether it's in pandemic time or almost any time, and you know, understand what even a few drops of water mean, you know, in the course of a week or a month or something. And so I feel like I became somewhat more tuned to those things when I moved here in the 80s than I had been in my earlier life.
I would add, I guess, just that, as Charles was saying, the landscape and the environment is so fragile here in the last year has been like completely disastrous. You know, it's the biggest drought in a long, long time. And I guess for me, what the pandemic has done in relation to that, I guess, is in some way, you know, obviously, if you look down the road, the human is not exempt at all from that bigger disaster. But it feels like, you know, in the very short term, we're, you know, in a little less immediately precarious situation than the Palo Verdes or something like that. And during the pandemic, that didn't really feel true. You know, you'd sort of walk around or, you know, approach a store and not go in or something like that. And that it felt like that the human beings were walking around in something every bit as fragile as what everything else was suffering as well.
I live in California, and so one of the things that happens because of the yearly horrors of fire season, which are getting worse every year, and this year is supposed to be even worse than ever, is just one aspect of living with these fires, and not that far from them either.
Which part are you in?
I'm in Oakland, so
Oh.
you know, all the Sacramento stuff, all the Napa stuff. We get, and the Santa Cruz fires. We get all that smoke, and we run 3 air purifiers and for weeks at a time, and tape all the windows shut and wear masks inside. You know, and obviously there are others who have it much worse, and I'm very aware of that. But what I'm trying to say is that there's something about the yearly horror of fire season that it seems to me to be a good, well, well, good isn't quite the right word, but let's say an effective lens for thinking about biosphere collapse, biodiversity loss, you know, and other kinds of social collapse that happen and will happen in relation to biosphere collapse. So it's very hard. And so part of what I think just living an ordinary day-to-day life in the Bay Area is like, on the one hand, there are all these interesting, even during pandemic, it's, you know, it's this very culturally vibrant situation. And at the same time, there's this sense of just what Timothy Morton calls hyperobject, a hyperobject. Like there's this catastrophe going on that's so large that no one seems to be able to think it. And we all know it. It's not an issue of, I mean, to some extent, I think I agree with Greta that there's still an issue of the lots of people not getting the information. But I also think it's tremendously important that so many, as I was trying to say in one of those poems, that so many people do have the information and are doing absolutely nothing with it. So there's this weird kind of double or triple or quadruple consciousness that I feel like I live in. And I feel like the fear that comes with fire season is a really good sort of way of crystallizing that multiple consciousness.
My fear is most of the people aren't getting it. You know, I mean, the
Well,
writing is like more on the wall. The wall is like falling down on us with the writing on it.
So nobody's seeing the writing. Yeah. It's really hard to judge. I think that communication around environmental catastrophe is itself a hyperobject. It's so big and it's so, you know, it's so like simultaneously simple and inevitable and utterly diffuse. And then you still, even now, have this tremendous multi-billion-dollar yearly effort to, you know, hide the truth coming from, you know, fossil fuel money. So yeah, it's very hard to know what people know and to know what they want to know about what they know.
I guess my question about that is, where are the points at which we can have an effect and start to change things? And what are we willing to do to get out of our comfort zone and go actively push on those points that where things make a difference?
That's a great question, and I would love for anyone but me to answer it. I mean, I joined Extinction Rebellion. Does that count?
Yeah, that's Extinction Rebellion. It's a great organization.
I like them very much. I like us. I mean, I get all the emails and stuff, but you know, I haven't gone out and lay down in front of a pipeline yet.
Well, the question is whether that kind of traditional political action is going to be effective, or whether it really needs to be taken directly to the financial people, corporate people, and the legislators who affect change, rather than just have this traditional way of doing it. You know, it was effective in the 60s, but I think the power people have become inured to that kind of effect. We see the last, you know, multiple years, BLM trying to make change in laws, but we're not really getting anywhere. I think we have to take things more directly to the people who are actively involved in precipitating the situation, and those who are able to affect change through law.
Well, that's
I
one.
like your idea of taking it to the banks. I think that's incredibly important.
The financialization of our Western world is one of the things that's been most effective in blinding us, as you say, to the changes that are going on around us, or making us try to look elsewhere. We say, oh, technology, we have our phones, you know, we say, you know, race or gender being so important. But all of this stuff is going to go away if we don't start actively engaging in this particular topic.
I think, though, James, one reason I do really appreciate somebody like Greta's action is I think the answers are going to come from that generation, or at least a generation younger than me. Not, I mean, I have work to do too, and you do too. But
I agree.
I do think they're the ones more likely to surprise us with the kind of paths they take and the actions they take. And, you know, and if they can get enough tension like she has, then they're going to be taking it to the United Nations and the question is, of course, are those people actually listening? But it has to start though with the action.
I wanted to add that, you know, in Texas, we see the oil and gas industry everywhere. And it's such a big, important aspect of what life is like here. And we also see these problems in the environment. There was an ice storm. That's really strange for this part of Texas. There's flooding, and the flooding gets worse and worse every year. The hurricanes are worse and worse every year. And it's really impossible to not think about how out of sync we are with the environment in which we're living, with the landscape, with the land itself. And it's impossible not to think about the obligation that we share in maintaining and taking care of it, just to live here in Houston. And yet, so many people just want to tune it out and not think about it. I do think that a lot of the language of poetry and writing in general in this region tends to draw attention to these things because we still have hope that there's some way to do something about it.
Yeah, then there's a further question. I would like that a lot, Saba, because I think that's exactly the point. Then for me, the next step is, what are the modes of writing, topics to address, methods of getting the work out that are going to be most effective in helping people to see what's going on around them, so that our every action contains the environmental component that's needed for each of us individually, for us as groups and as a society, to relate to our surroundings in a better way.
You know, I think that's going to be regionally different everywhere we go, you know, at least here, at least in Texas, and the Texas that I know of now, not what it was like when I was younger. You tell someone what to do and they are not going to do it. They're going to do the exact opposite. So language that involves activism cannot be overly prescriptive or create kind of mandates. But I do think that writing in a way that demonstrates how precious the landscape is, how deeply connected people are to the land, to the animals, to the place, that helps people feel that bond or that connection, which I think ties into some of the occult energies that are out there in the world right now, or some of the ecofeminist energies that are out there in the world right now, which is why I'm so fascinated by it. I think showing people why this matters is relevant to this region. I don't think that's the same for everywhere. I think it's, you know, I think in California, people are more aware of the landscape. You just kind of have to be. When the ground starts shaking under your feet, you're very aware of the ground, you know? And I think that it's got to be regionally adapted. I think that's my opinion.
I thought your ecofeminist discussion in our panel was particularly convincing. That the relationship of a particular gender relationship to the surroundings is different than this kind of like gender neutral way of talking about it as science.
Right, that sort of that abstract language. I think in the selection I read about the man who was writing about the glacier, if you remember him, there is this sense that the change that we've seen in the climate is so big, the scale is so big, that human consciousness can't automatically wrap its mind around that. It's mythological in scope, and unless we look at that, unless we recognize that this kind of change that's happening, that we are enabling with reckless actions, I don't think that we're going to be able to undo this kind of scope or this kind of scale. So there has to be a reckoning that takes into account this language that is neither abstract nor concrete, but invokes that sense of scope in people in a way that enables or inspires immediate or intimate action to the planet, towards the planet.
Speaking, Saba, of undoing, you know, and thinking about your area particularly, and Houston, and how one hears, you know, Houston was basically built without even thinking about drainage, for example. And also in Texas is famous for no zoning laws in most cities. So do you see that there might be a will to undo, redo, is even possible to redo some of those basic infrastructure things in a city that huge? And
I don't know that humans necessarily have a choice. If we wake up every year with half the city flooded, we're going to have to do something about it. So I think before long, the city's going to have to start contending with some of these things.
you know,
Yeah. One of the things I always like to listen to is when they say the kind of thinking that created these problems is not the kind of thinking that's going to solve them. And, you know, I mean, bringing back grasslands and estuaries to the, you know, the whole Gulf Coast, you know, is like essential if you don't want to be encroached by water. I mean, some of it is like actually going back to some other practices that we've eliminated for whatever reason. But I think with the, you know, the other thing I think about is like with the writers particularly, I mean, the job is to look at the language. There's some of our language is not helpful in how we deal with issues. It's not helpful.
Such as?
We call plants and animals its. The raccoon, it climbed the tree. Raccoons are not its. They're like us. They're mammals like us. They're akin to us. They're dependent on certain systems in nature that we are also dependent on. We can't keep putting them aside as if they're, you know, they don't matter.
mhm.
It's like just, oh, okay, you know, and that's something that I'm really aware of it. I've been made aware of it through mostly this woman who wrote Braiding Sweetgrass talks about this in her native language. They have a word for that. You know, they describe it as their kin, you know, so they're sister, brother, whatever. And if there's a bunch of them, you know, they're kin. And, you know, and I think that makes so much more sense because
Even
we need everybody, everything to make
even
it.
in other languages like Spanish, there's no it's there, like the trees, the raccoons, the rocks, the sky, everything is a he or a she.
Mhm.
So I mean that's it. I mean, if you think of just about that as a kind of a mental thing, like if you try to, you know, achieve fluency in Spanish, you have to start remembering that there's no it, you know. So I mean there is in some rare cases, but as far as all these living things, including geographic things,
I mean, it's
you know,
tiny, but I think it's so important that we kind of get rid of certain things in language that don't really describe where we want to go and find other ways, whether we all speak Spanish, I mean, that would be fine with me. Que bueno, yeah.
I think that in all the poems that people read today, we have this sense of kinship with the world and the life of the world. And I think that by using language that demonstrates that and invokes that, we can start to see things in the world as more than just resource, because the language of resources and stuff that we can exploit to make our personal lives a little bit better is exactly what's contributing to not recognizing the immediacy of this problem. So.
I'll say as a Spanish speaker that there's too many he's in Spanish.
What part of the language that, you know.
That's right, later.
It sure seems like we have a very screwed up way of thinking about things. And as long as we think about things in the same way that we're thinking about things, we're going to have the same results. And so insofar as, you know, writing in all cultural productions and not only that, but every conversation and everything you read and think and speak with one another, it's all contributing to the way we think or a different way to think. And we really have to think very differently about who we are and where we, you know, what the planet is and what animals are, all these things. We really have it all upside down and backwards. And boy, oh boy, I mean, to me, it's so scary because I think we've painted ourselves into a corner. You know what I mean? It's not going to be that easy to get out of this because, like, you mentioned Houston, people, yeah, Houston is unsustainable, but there's a lot of people that are living now in Houston and they're not going away. What are they gonna do? So like, it's like that. At every corner, we've pushed ourselves up against the wall. And I think that people are going a little bananas, because I agree with Joseph. Everybody does know this, however much they try to bury it or deny it. Everybody does know this at this point. And people are going nuts because they don't know they can't think the thought, they don't know how to handle it. They're shooting people, they're doing crazy stuff, it's really bad, bad, bad. So I don't know how we get out of it. I mean, I wish I did, but James mentioned the finance before. Bill McKibben's been writing about how they're disinvesting from fossil fuels. It's hard to imagine how an intelligent investor could think that fossil fuels is a good investment for 25 years from now. So once they disinvest from fossil fuels, I think that'll be a big deal. But
McKibben had a really good piece on banking. And
the other day,
and whether they could be allies. I was just also going to add on, Norman, to what you were saying, that I think that the idea of changing the way we think and changing the way that we use language, and obviously all of those things are absolutely necessary and they're fascinating. And I think in addition to being incredibly difficult, and one of the things that I think poetry does, and I think everybody on the panel is involved in this project, and one of the things that poetry does is listen really hard to how we think and to like the phenomenology of writing and knowing and guessing and praying and being wrong and understanding and changing. And all of those things are, in some ways, they're easier for poets, maybe because of the sustained attention to language, which I guess makes poets a kind of energized cadre or something. But on the other hand, they're just as hard for poets. I mean, I'm always reminded of my teacher, John Yao's insistence that poets really aren't that much, if at all, they aren't really more sensitive than other people. They're just as flawed and selfish and willing to settle. And I think that means that we are acting out the kind of transformation in language, and especially in awareness and consciousness, and that has to happen fast. And yet it doesn't just happen when you just sort of say, well, now I'm only going to use this word and not that word. It has to go much deeper than that.
Right.
So Joseph, can I ask you something? So one of the things that struck me, I think this is the second time I've heard some of the current book. I think you read it in Tucson as well. And in your work, there's always a really powerful sort of scalar thing sort of between the political and the social and the familial.
Yeah.
But in what you're doing now, it feels that that's especially so. And there's a kind of heightened sense of the way one puts added pressure and in some way, maybe deforms, but might reform the other. So the familial stuff seems shot through with the kind of urgency that, is at least in part one of your response to, the environmental cataclysm. So I guess that's not a question yet, but I wonder if there's anything that's an observation. Let's just say that. So.
Well, thank you. And my father died in 2010, and my mother, and he had been sick for a while, and my mother died suddenly in 2018. And so both of those deaths are, really, really present in the book. I think it would be too easy. There's something about the formulation of elegy that I've been wrestling. I could go on and on. I feel like I have a very particular understanding of what elegy is, and it's very anti-traditional, very sort of trying to radically change what elegy could be, or pastoral elegy. But the point I'm making is that the earth is dying, I'm dying, and my parents died, and all of that death has to be more than just death, right? It has to be a way of speaking honestly, or trying as hard or even harder than ever to speak honestly. So just to put it real frankly, there are things I can say to and from and with and about my parents that I just wasn't going to say when they were still alive, you know, and yes, that has something to do with the climate catastrophe. It's in that space of catastrophe that further levels of awareness of what, you know, what family was or is, or what just human connection and human connection with any kind of otherness, it takes place and deepen.
Yeah,
It's extraordinarily complex, isn't it? This is why I like Saba's use of the occult and kind of the calling into the conversation of that term. It's like one of the things I noticed early on in the COVID situation was like this this sort of ineluctable change in the atmosphere in the social space. Like, you know, you go into a coffee shop and like everybody's a little bit on edge. Do you wear a mask? Do you not wear a mask? Does it mean anything to wear a mask? Are you wearing a mask because of the meaning of the mask? Are you wearing a mask because it's actually doing something physical? I don't know if that's true. Is it a social thing? Is it a scientific thing? And like this stuff, you know, that circulates in the atmosphere and is so complex and has so much to do with why people do what they do, you know, that affects why they, you know, whether or not they take a single-use plastic bag when they're in the grocery store line, even though nobody's going to see them. Okay, it's strictly between them and the plastic bag. You know, they have to negotiate this thing that's actually like really complex. And do they blow it off at that moment, or do they because it's just easier? And what the fuck difference does it make of the 40 billion single-use plastic bags that are getting dumped into the ocean every day? Or do they make a stand out of this tiny little item just for a cashier who like never even thought that it was a problem, you know? Anyway, and I think the occult is a good way to describe that space, you know. I mean, it has to do with language, and I think, you know, what we as poets have to do is begin to incant, you know. I mean, it is it's a moving intuitively through the space that can maybe accomplish more than, like, you know, a physical thing, or certainly than like an ethical admonition not to use plastic bags, just for example, you know.
I mean, I think, you know, life is sacred, the world is sacred. We don't defile the things that we consider sacred. If we make them abstract, they don't mean anything to us. They're not sacred. So.
Right. Yeah.
Bill, going back to it, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Well, I think that's true, Saba, but I also worry when we make things sacred, do we make them other? You know, I tend to think that we have to think of our language as involved with the natural world and with the environment and even all of its problems, rather than our language imposes or something there. You know, it's almost like changing consciousness so that we're not writing our take on the environment. We're trying to understand it and what our place is as just part of it. That's what I was trying to point out in my presentation on the ecology panel the other day. And I think there's lots of models of poets who actually do that very well. Yeah.
This has like been truly great, and like one of the best discussions. Posts are great reading and great discussion post reading, but alas, I kind of have to close it down, and just thank you all again so much, and both for today and the other panels that you've almost all of you have been on, yeah, almost all, and so please, come see us in the panels that continue on. There's one a day from now on. I think I found one day coming up when there wasn't one, but normally about dinner time and on weekends, in the afternoons too. Please check us out tomorrow, Saturday and Sunday both. Two events in mid-afternoon and late afternoon on both Saturday and Sunday, and they're all four really great. And just go to nolapoetry.com, check them out, come see us. Thank you again so much, and ciao.
Thank you, Bill. Thanks so much to you guys for doing all this. It's really such a great, wonderful thing to be part of.
Our pleasure and incredibly rewarding.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Goodbye, everybody.
Bye, Norman.
Does everybody see Nance's hand in there? Okay.
Yes.
Hi. I'll see y'all soon, I hope.
Bye.